All right, let's jump right in. Today, we've got a really cool economic puzzle for you. It's all about how two countries, literally on opposite sides of the world, are locked in this multi-billion-dollar dance of supply and demand. So what in the world connects Brazil, Latin America's biggest economy, with a manufacturing giant like Bangladesh? You might be surprised. The answer is way more important and honestly way more interesting than it looks on the surface.
We're talking about a multi-billion-dollar relationship here, and it's one that's been quietly growing, almost hiding in plain sight. But here's the kicker. At the heart of it all is a massive, and I really mean massive, opportunity. Not just for Brazil and Bangladesh, but maybe, just maybe, it could be a whole new way to think about global trade.
So that brings us to our first section. We're calling it an unlikely economic partnership. I mean, just picture a globe for a second. These two countries are about as far apart as you can get. So it's definitely not geography that's bringing them together. Nope. It's something economists call complementary demand. It's pretty simple, really. What one country has tons of, the other one desperately needs to keep its own economy humming. Okay, but here's where the story gets really interesting. This partnership, it's not balanced, not even a little bit. And that leads us right to the heart of the matter, the great trade imbalance. So get this. In the 2023-24 fiscal year, Brazil sent a whopping $2.66 billion worth of stuff to Bangladesh. Let's just pause on that for a second. $2.66 billion. That is a huge number.
All right, now let's look at the other side of the coin. In that same period, what did Bangladesh send back to Brazil? Just $187 million. The difference is, well, it's just staggering, isn't it?
And this chart right here, it just lays it all out. It's not just a gap, it's more like a canyon. You see that massive bar for Brazil's exports? And then, that much smaller one for Bangladesh? Wow. Seeing it visually like this really hits you with the sheer scale of the imbalance. Now, you might think a gap that big is a huge problem. But here's the interesting twist. That's not how the experts are looking at it. They're saying, and I'm quoting here, this imbalance is not necessarily a problem. Rather, it is a clear signal of where to act. So think about that. It's not a bug. It's a feature. It's basically a giant signpost pointing to a massive opportunity. So you gotta ask, why is it so lopsided to begin with? Well, that takes us to our next section, a story of complementary needs. This really breaks it down for us. Look, Brazil is an agricultural giant, right? They've got cotton, soy, grains, sugar, you name it. And what does Bangladesh need? Well, it needs the raw materials for its enormous textile industry, it needs to ensure its food security, and it needs animal feed. It's like a perfect puzzle piece fit. What one has, the other needs. Simple as that. And this constant flow of essential goods back and forth has created something pretty important. Experts are calling it a strategic corridor. And that's a great term for it, because it's so much more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. This is the lifeline that helps keep Bangladesh's factories running and its people fed. It's really the bedrock of this whole relationship. Okay, so we get it. We see the imbalance and we know why it's there. So the billion-dollar question, or in this case, the $2.8 billion question, is how do you close that gap? Well, that's what we're tackling next, bridging the opportunity gap. All right, this is where it gets really exciting, because Bangladesh is so much more than just a garment factory to the world. They've got incredible potential in other areas. Think about it. Pharmaceuticals, they're great at making generics. Jute, not your grandma's old bags, but as a future material for things like sustainable packaging. And that's not even mentioning leather goods, home textiles, agro-processed items. The list goes on. The potential here is just huge. But you know, all that potential doesn't just magically turn into sales. You need someone to connect the dots. And that's exactly the role of groups like the Brazil-Bangladesh Chamber of Commerce and Industry. They're the matchmakers, the facilitators. They are, and this is a quote, a vital link between the business communities. Basically, they make it easier for people thousands of miles apart to actually do business together. And it's not just businesses. Governments have a clear game plan too. It's a step-by-step process. You start small, right? You make things easier for specific industries. Smoother visa processes, less customs hassle. That builds trust. Once you have that trust, then you can start talking about the bigger stuff, like formal trade agreements. It's smart. You gotta walk before you can run. So what's the big picture here? Where is this all heading? Well, it looks like the future is all about partnership. And we're talking about going way beyond just buying and selling more stuff. The real goal is a much deeper collaboration. Things like making those food supply chains even stronger and more reliable. beefing up the connections for the textile industry. And here's a huge one, working together to help Bangladeshi medicines get approved in Brazil, which is a tough market to crack. And of course, investing in better logistics to make everything move faster. Because at the end of the day, what's the goal? It's actually pretty simple, but it's also incredibly important. It's about getting past the opportunity talk, all the meetings and speeches about potential, and getting to repeatable transactions. Real, actual business happening over and over again. That's when you know you've built something that's really going to last. And all of this leaves us with one last really big question to chew on. With everything changing in the world, with global supply chains getting reshuffled, could this unique connection between South Asia and Latin America be a whole new model for how countries trade with each other? Could this be the blueprint for the future? It's a pretty fascinating thought, isn't it?